Now we're going to look at ascending tracts in the spinal cord. An ascending tract brings sensory information into the spinal cord. So an ascending tract starts somewhere way out here in the body where a sensor picks up information and via a neuron, action potentials in a neuron, brings that information into the spinal cord. Sensory information comes in via the posterior root. So notice I drew my sensory neuron, the axon of my sensory neuron coming in through the posterior root. And the soma of that sensory neuron is right here in my posterior root ganglion. And my sensory neuron enters and it ends right here in the posterior horn of the gray matter. I'm going to draw a little hook right there to make a synapse. So this is our first order neuron. Brings the sensory information from the body through the spinal nerve, through the posterior root, and into the spinal cord where it ends, with its soma in the posterior root ganglion of the spinal cord. Our second order neuron has its synapse right here in the posterior horn with the first order neuron. So here's the synaptic bulb of the first order neuron. Here's the soma of the second order neuron. Information is sent via synaptic transmission. And that neuron decussates. There's that word that means to cross over to the other side. And don't take it through the white matter. It has to go through the gray commissure. And if you've got enough space, don't let it go through the central canal because that's a hole. So that neuron decussates, passes over to the other side of the butterfly, and then that neuron begins to ascend the spinal cord. It goes up through the spinal cord. Remember, it's an ascending tract. So we are in the white matter of the spinal cord when we're out here. Ascending and descending tracts are in the white matter. So it ascends and it goes to the thalamus, which I'm going to put right here. So the soma is right here. Here's the axon. The axon decussates, crosses from the gray matter to the white matter, ascends through the white matter, and ends right here at the thalamus. That is our second order sensory neuron. The third order neuron synapses in the thalamus. So we'll draw the soma, the third order neuron right there in the thalamus. And then it passes to the sensory region of the cerebral cortex, which we've drawn very simply right here. When we get to the brain, we will cover that in more detail. So there's our third order neuron. To summarize, how does sensory information get from your body to your brain? An action potential passes from the receptor along the axon of the first order neuron through the spinal nerve, through the posterior root, and passes into the gray matter of the spinal cord. Neurotransmitter is released. Neurotransmitter binds to the second order neuron in the posterior horn. Neurotransmitter binds there, causes an action potential in the second order neuron. That action potential is passed along the axon to the other side of the spinal cord, decussation, and the action potential ascends through the white matter of the spinal cord up into the brain, into the thalamus. In the thalamus, that action potential ends. Neurotransmitter is released. It binds to the soma of the third order neuron. The third order neuron has an action potential, and that information is passed via action potential up to the sensory region of the cerebral cortex.